Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and today we are previewing week 2 of the NFL season between the San Francisco 49ers and the Minnesota Vikings as the red and gold trying to do the one thing they have not been able to do since 1992. That is win on the road in Minnesota. If you're thinking back to yourself, they haven't won under Kyle Shanahan. Really? Well, dating back 2018 in Minnesota, week 1, Jimmy Garoppolo, the amazing play to Dante Pettis, that was a loss. Last year, Monday Night Football, Brock Purdy gets concussed. Christian McCaffrey fumbles. No Deebo Samuel. No Trent Williams. They also lose that game. So it's not just a Kyle Shanahan thing, but in recent history, there have been inching closer and closer and closer to winning in Minnesota, hoping that this Sunday is the start of something new, if you will. Both teams are coming into week 2 1-0. San Francisco obviously taking it to the New York Jets in prime time this past Monday, the Jordan Mason game, if you will. Last week, though, for the Minnesota Vikings was kind of the come out party, if you will, for Sam Darnold. Many people thought that the Vikings quarterback room was the worst in football. They had J.J. McCarthy, a first-round pick this year. Sam Darnold, what was to be expected of either one of those players? McCarthy's out for the entire year, leaving just Sam Darnold to lead this Vikings team to a hopeful winning record, and maybe if all things go perfectly, a playoff appearance. But week 1 was everything and more for Vikings fans. He was phenomenal against the New York Giants. Now, again, I get it. It's the New York Giants. What do you make of that? We'll dive into that today. We'll talk about how San Francisco can stop Justin Jefferson, and also who needs to step up if Christian McCaffrey will or is not going to play this Sunday. What about Brock Purdy? This is an opportunity for Brock Purdy to face a defense he has lost to. Don't forget, Brock Purdy has never lost to the same team twice. This year, he will have 2 opportunities to change that or to keep that going, if you will. The Vikings this Sunday and the Chiefs in week number 7. So let's talk about this Sunday's matchup. Niners, Vikings, 10 a.m., battle of NFC opponents. San Francisco's first NFC matchup this season. The Vikings' second NFC matchup. And we all know, although divisional games are much more important, conference games also matter as well. So a big game for San Francisco. And not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but the win against the Jets was big because the Rams lost that game. The Rams also have a ton of offensive linemen hurt. Puka Nacua could be out for an extended period of time. You never want to project of who's going to be your biggest competition, but the expectation is it's going to be the Rams. This Sunday could be another chance for San Francisco to increase their lead over the Rams and maybe even over the Seattle Seahawks, but that is a conversation for a potential different day. Maybe it's a Victory Monday on the show, and that's a conversation we have. But this Sunday, San Francisco needs to look not ahead, but right in front of them. Vikings, Niners, what will transpire this Sunday in Minnesota, which should be one of the better games of the slate this week. Dolphins and Bills was ugly. It was kind of gross, to be honest with you. Tua Tagovailoa got concussed again and was a scary play. Just terrible for Tua. Just terrible. I hope he's okay. Concussions are scary. As we know, Brock Purdy suffered 2 last year. 2 stingers is what they were actually called. But one of those was against the Vikings last year, where quarterback sneak, and he got smacked in the top of the helmet. Seemingly, that's the reason as to why he threw that second pick late in the game. But this Sunday, the story's hopefully different. The story is hopefully Brock Purdy isn't concussed or doesn't get a stinger and can actually not have double vision for the latter half of the Vikings game this Sunday. But more importantly, if you will, San Francisco is not going to have, or seemingly not going to have, and be likely without Christian McCaffrey for a second consecutive week. So the question is, can the offense continue to thrive without CMC? Or will a Sam Darnold-led Vikings team continue their shocking start to 2024? If you listen to my 2024 seasonal predictions, we dove into each division, talked about the awards predictions and the Super Bowl winner. In that award prediction or in that seasonal prediction, I mentioned that I didn't have much faith in the Minnesota Vikings. And I guess you can say, thankfully, this Sunday, albeit you never want anyone to be injured, they're not going to have one of their better offensive weapons on the field. Wide receiver Jordan Addison is not going to play in this game. So Niner fans don't have to worry about a blown coverage on a zero blitz or a Mooney Ward interception go right through his hand on a zero blitz before halftime, in which last year it certainly was a point of contention. It certainly was one of the reasons as to why the Fire Steve Wilks train was chugging along very, very strongly. That's hopefully not going to be the case this Sunday against the Vikings. And diving into key matchups in this game, I think clear cut, there is this obvious talking point that everyone should be discussing, and that is Niner quarterback Brock Purdy against the Brian Flores Vikings defense. Now, like I already stated earlier, Brock Purdy has never lost to the same team twice. Not the Seahawks, not the Rams. He'll play Kansas City again this season, but he also lost to the Vikings last year. This is his opportunity to get his revenge in some sort of way, although I don't think he views it as that. This is his chance to not have two consecutive losses to the exact same team, dating back to last year, Monday Night Football, where San Francisco did lose that game in Minnesota. Purdy was 21 for 30, 272 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. But again, as already earlier stated, a lot of context to that. No Deebo Samuel, no Trent Williams. Christian McCaffrey fumbled early in that game, which could easily have turned the tide, maybe allowed San Francisco to win that game on Monday Night Football. And he also may have been concussed in that game, leading to the second interception late to seal the win for the Vikings. But looking at this Sunday, forgetting what happened in the past, looking at this Sunday, I think Brian Flores is an excellent early test this year for Brock Purdy and San Francisco's offense. Of course, you wish CMC was out there with the guys, and maybe he will be, but the expectation is he's a long shot to play. So when we are working under the assumption he's not going to be out there. So it's Brock Purdy, Deebo, Brandon Aiyuk, Trent Williams, George Kittle, a little bit of Kyle Juszczyk, and then Jordan Mason in the backfield facing off against Brian Flores' defense. And Brian Flores is an excellent defensive coordinator. You know, what he lacked as a head coach, he certainly makes up for in what he can do as a defensive coach. He, I think, is arguably one of the most underrated defensive minds in football, very Belichickian style, but he's excellent at masking blitzes. You know, there are times where he'll put 8, 9 guys in the box and make you think, hey, I'm coming with everybody at you. Then he'll drop 8 guys in coverage, and you're like, whoa, how did that happen? I never thought I'd see that in my entire life. With that said, Brock Purdy cannot panic. And that is one beautiful thing about Brock Purdy, is that his pocket presence is stellar. His ability to evade contact and pressure is, one of the better components of his game, and really, I think, is underrated, or one of the more underrated aspects of his game. But Purdy can't panic. I think what Flores does so well is he makes quarterbacks think, okay, blitz, here comes the blitz. I have to get rid of the ball early. And it makes them feel like that they have little time to throw, when in reality, he's not blitzing at all. And it makes quarterbacks make mistakes, throw interceptions they weren't supposed to, and it leads them to, again, giving the ball away when they actually had time to drop back 5-7 steps and make their throws go through their reads. So Brock Purdy can simply not panic this Sunday when Brian Flores likely brings the house, or at least masks bringing the house to him, which, if I was to be honest, which I think I should be, um, Brock Purdy, I think, is one of the more well equipped quarterbacks to not panic. I think, the word panic really isn't in Brock Purdy's dictionary. I think when you look at the word panic next to Brock Purdy's name, it says doesn't panic. That's how calm he is. I think Alex Smith said on ESPN this past week that Purdy's one of the most calm quarterbacks in the pocket. And it really is true that it doesn't matter what comes his way. It really goes into, Brock Purdy as a person. You can tell that no matter what comes Brock Purdy's way in life, on the football field, he's not going to panic. He knows who he is. He's not going to sway too far left or right. He's going to stick right in the middle and be true to himself. I think Brock Purdy is one of the more well-equipped quarterbacks to face a Brian Flores defense, but Brian Flores is really, really smart. Flores will throw trick after trick after trick at Brock Purdy and any quarterback. Daniel Jones last week could not handle a Brian Flores defense, multiple interceptions. Even last year for Brock Purdy, you know, he had never seen Brian Flores' defense before. We do this better. And, you have to look back and point to that game last year and say, how can we learn from this? And I think Brock Purdy is so smart in the way he can learn. Like, my expectation this year for Brock Purdy is for him to inevitably beat the Chiefs, to see what happened last year in the Super Bowl and grow and learn and say, how can I combat this the next time we come face to face with that opponent? The same thing goes for this game against the Vikings, which is a much worse defense. I think that, in this game, while you would love Christian McCaffrey to be out there, you would love, for all these tricks Flores throws at you, Kyle Shanahan truly needs to have a consistent check down option, which usually would be Christian McCaffrey. I think having Kyle Juszczyk or George Kittle, my mind would go to more Deebo Samuel because he's so good at getting the ball and being a playmaker after the catch, even if he's getting the ball, 2 or 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage. I think Kyle Shanahan needs to give Brock Purdy that kind of quick out option if plays aren't there once Flores inevitably blitzes. But I think Purdy, having seen this defense before, is going to show us that I've learned, I've grown, and I've taken what didn't work last year. I've taken what, the mistakes I may have made against the Vikings last year, and I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again this Sunday. But I do think that for Kyle Shanahan's sake, to aid his quarterback, it would be smart to give him that consistent check down option. Again, my mind would be Deebo Samuel. There's nothing wrong with early in this game utilizing the Deebo Samuel end arounds, the screens, the wide back stuff, get him the ball early, similar to how he was with Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, again, Brock Purdy's not Jimmy Garoppolo, but I think there is some valuable things you can take from the Jimmy Garoppolo era and how they utilize Deebo Samuel with Brock Purdy against a defensive mind like Brian Flores that is going to want to blitz and bring the house and make Brock Purdy, or force Brock Purdy to make mistakes and see if he can get rattled early. Because last year, well, it wasn't too much panic. It was just more so you can tell Brock Purdy hadn't seen something like the Flores defense before. But thankfully, last year's defense is not as good as this year's defense in Minnesota. I firmly believe that Brock Purdy and San Francisco's passing offense should be able to really brutalize the Vikings secondary. If I asked you who was in Minnesota's secondary, I guarantee you could not name one person. Would it shock you that Stephon Gilmore is in Minnesota? Now, obviously, the Vikings did lose Kyrie Jackson to a tragic accident this offseason, which just sucks. It's terrible. And I hope his family can find some solace in that some way, somehow. And our thoughts and prayers definitely go out to him and his family. But the Vikings defense, because of tragedies like that and a lot of injuries along the way, have seen their secondary group kind of be shredded, if you will, where they don't have anybody back there. Now, to be fair, Brian Flores knows how to put his guys in positions to succeed and will utilize the blitz to aid his subpar secondary and give them better looks and make quarterbacks have to make poor throws and fit things into tighter windows once the blitz comes when he rushes 7 or 8 guys at them at a time. But I really do think that the Giants and Niners offenses really shouldn't be in the same conversation. But for this sake, it should be that they are so much in different conversations that this is not going to be the Vikings defense you saw against the G-Men in week 1. This, to me, is an opportunity for San Francisco to have a little fun if Brandon Aiyuk is closer to full speed. You have George Kittle. You have Jawan Jennings, who was just tremendous against the Jets in week 1. And, of course, you have Deebo Samuel. Maybe you see some Chris Conley in this game. Maybe I think there is an opportunity, although slim, that we could see a Jacob Cowing deep ball in this one. I think it would behoove Kyle Shanahan to test this Viking secondary. To put it bluntly, minus week 1, it just doesn't have the bodies and doesn't really have the skill to keep up with a Niners offense that possesses so many stars at every single position. It's almost like Kyle Shanahan usually wants to force the opposing defenses to stop the run. I don't think that'll change in this game, but in my mind, I'm thinking, you know what? Like, this may be a game where, dating back to the Philadelphia Eagles game last year, although it didn't work in that one because Philadelphia is a much better defense than the Vikings are. Shanahan passed the ball continually in the first few drives in that game. I almost want to see Kyle go back to that a little bit early in Minnesota. Just test them. It's like, look, we know you want to stack the box. We know you want to bring blitzes. If you're going to blitz, we're going to test you deep. And you have the weapons to do so. You have the bodies to do so. You have the speed now to take deep shots downfield like Brandon Aiyuk, like Cowing. And if you get lucky, maybe it's George Kittle. I mean, the Vikings linebackers, although it's Blake Cashman and Van Ginkel, like, they're not great. Jordan Hicks has gone more of a coverage linebacker. And again, that secondary really does not possess the tools, the skills to keep up with the offense that San Francisco possesses. So take deep shots early, get aggressive, make them stop you. Then you can always revert back to the running game and hope things work out there with end arounds and play action and bootlegs. There are so many ways Kyle Shanahan can almost offset what Brian Flores wants to do with Brock Purdy. Brian Flores also is a defensive mind that likes to play 3 safety sets. He's someone that wants to take away the middle of the field, very similar as to how the Ravens do or try to do on most days. The Vikings, again, are not likely going to be able to do that, as the Ravens have consistently done the past decade and a half, it feels like. But they'll certainly try. I just don't think that, again, with the weapons Kyle Shanahan has, like, had Jimmy Garoppolo been the quarterback of this Niners team, or if he was the quarterback of this Niners team, or name any game manager that likes to focus on the middle of the field, which Kyle still likes to do a lot, but now he has a quarterback that can throw outside the numbers towards the sidelines. There's a real opportunity here for Kyle Shanahan to get creative and gash this Viking secondary to a point where everybody that talked about Brock Purdy's stat line in week 1 and being underwhelmed by it will say, oh, did you see Brock Purdy against the Vikings on Sunday? Oh my goodness, that was an MVP-like performance. I do want to give Brian Flores credit. There is a realm of possibility where the blitzes do get to Purdy, which is why I think that having those checkdowns will be so valuable for him, whether it's Juszczyk or Kittle or Deebo, even Mason or Grendo, no matter who it is. It's always important to have that option out there for him because Flores will blitz. But I do think that if you blitz, you're only giving Kyle Shanahan more foresight to inevitably take a shot downfield, which should, in this case, hurt the Vikings very, very badly. Hence why I'm leaning towards Brock Purdy having a really good day. It may not be as efficient, but it may be, deep shots downfield. It might be more so of how we kind of saw him against the Steelers in week number 1 last year, where it was good. It was honestly great, if we're being honest, but it wasn't perfect. There was some blunders here or there, but Brock was really good in that game. Scored a handful of touchdowns. We saw Brandon Aiyuk reestablish himself. I'm going to go on a limb here and say Brandon Aiyuk gets into the end zone this Sunday. I think that Jets game rubbed him the wrong way, as it should have. And I think that dropping that touchdown in the end zone on the diving catch in the back of the goal line, that's going to bother him. That's going to live with him until he gets in the end zone for the first time. And how do you erase a long off season of despair and dread of, will they keep me? Will they trade me? Then you play pretty poorly in your first game. How do you erase that? Go score a touchdown early in this game. I wouldn't be shocked if we see Kyle try to get Deebo Samuel going early, but I also would not be shocked to see Kyle say, you know what? Kind of like in 2021 when we got Trey Lance that first touchdown of the season. Let's get Brandon Aiyuk that first touchdown of this game to kind of reinstill that confidence in him and get him settled in, because if you do that, it only opens up so much more for your offense, especially in this game when if you can get BA's confidence back, he is going to be a nightmare for that Viking secondary. I also think in this game that, like any game, you want to control the trenches, obviously. But I think that in this one specifically, San Francisco really can control the trenches on both sides of the football. Would it shock you that San Francisco's offensive line ranked 13th in football last week in pass protection? Yeah. It was not in the 20s. I think last year it topped out at 19 or 18. It was 13th in week number 1. And that was with the first couple drives being rather bumpy, if you will. Jake Brendel got blown up by Javon Kinlaw. Bukivitz got beat a few times, but ultimately a really strong performance from the offensive line. And you can argue that the Vikings defensive line, although we'll see more blitzes this Sunday from them, is not as good. They did lose Danielle Hunter this offseason to the Texans. They lost DJ Wanham to the Panthers, who Wanham isn't a big name, but he's played a lot of snaps, giving them some valuable depth behind players like Danielle Hunter in the past. They did add Jonathan Grenard, who I think was a Texan last year, and they did draft Dallas Turner. I know many of you might look at that and say, well, that isn't much. I don't want to disrespect Grenard or Dallas Turner and the rest of the guys on that defensive line. They had 5 sacks against the Giants last week, but like everything against the Giants, do you take the Saints win as legitimate over the Panthers? It's a win. Sure, you're 1-0, but it's the Panthers. Do you take anything Minnesota did against the Giants as authentic? Obviously, some of it, yes. I think the Vikings' defensive focus is attack, be aggressive against any offense they're playing. I would expect the same this Sunday for the Vikings defense. You'll have that Skol chant in the background. Skol, Skol, Skol. They're going to want to get that fan base involved early. They're going to want to put San Francisco's offense on their heels with blitzes, with stunts, with utilizing all this trickery Brian Flores has at his disposal. But again, while I do think a player like Colton McKivitz may struggle, a player like Aaron Banks with a calf injury may struggle at times, my money is kind of on the Niners offensive line continuing to hold up and move the football, and at least, like they were last week, be really strong in the passing game. And obviously Dominic Pooney, who was great against the Jets in the running game, and even, of course, Trent Williams, who will have now his second game under his belt this year, hopefully is closer to 100%, but didn't seem to be a problem in week 1. My money is on San Francisco's offensive line, continuing their strong start to the season. But I will say this, I'm a little concerned about Jake Brendel. Maybe not in this game, but Jake Brendel, for the lack of pressures he gave up, the lack of sacks he gave up against the Jets, he was like really bad. Like really, really bad. I'm not sure if it's the injury he had, the knee tendonitis, knee arthritis, whatever it was. But he just didn't look like the Jake Brendel of old. And old, I mean 2 years ago. um, I would not be shocked if that trend continues, that John Feliciano becomes the starting center at some point this year. That was my bold prediction coming out of training camp before John Feliciano got injured. So maybe that's still a possibility, but um, keep an eye on Jake Brendel in this game because he really struggled, like really struggled against the Jets. But the stat lines would say otherwise. So other than him, I do expect some good things, but hopefully, for as bad as he was, he can't really get any lower than that. So hopefully it's better on Sunday against Minnesota. But flipping that conversation of the offensive lines and defensive lines, the Vikings offensive line, for despite having Christian Darrisaw, who is, I think, one of the best left tackles in football, not named Trent Williams, certainly one of the most highest paid left tackles in football, not named Trent Williams. They were terrible against the Giants. And Brian Dable is a good head coach. I think their quarterback certainly holds them back. Their decision making to not bring back Saquon, and just a fiasco in New York. But Brian Dable is a good head coach. And that defense in New York has a new defensive coordinator. Wink Martindale's gone. He was fired last year. They have a new person in there. I'm forgetting their name, but that's nonetheless. The point is that the Vikings offensive line against the Giants last week, which we can all admit, their defense is nothing really to talk about, to write home about. They ranked 29th in football last week after facing the Giants. And that game was in the bag for 3 quarters. And that first quarter was like, oh my goodness, this game might get ugly early. And I think that, for the Vikings, it's like, how do we allow this offensive line that has so many good pieces on it, Christian Darrisaw being the key component of that, how is it ranked 29th? How is it ranked 4th worst in football? If you have a positional group circled that you might say, wow, they should just go nuts this Sunday, that is Nick Bosa and the boys on the defensive line. They were mauling the Jets' offensive line last week, which otherwise held up. They didn't get too many pressures. I think they may have had 11 total. Nick Bosa had 5. Leonard Floyd had 4. It wasn't like they were in the backfield all the time. They were just moving those guys left and right, erasing the lanes to run, and almost filling up lanes for Aaron Rodgers to maneuver in the pocket without getting many sacks. Only had 1 last week. I am fully expecting San Francisco's edge rushing group to get home multiple times. Now, there is a caveat to that similar to how I said Shanahan will want to allot a check down option consistently for Brock Purdy. You wish it was CMC, but against the Brian Flores defense that blitzes, you always want to have that option of, hey, I have nowhere to go. Here's the check down. I do think that we did see a little bit of this against the Jets when the Jets scored their first touchdown. There was about 3 or 4 screen passes on that drive. I would not be surprised if the Vikings looked at that, said, okay, San Francisco certainly adjusted to it, but it may be an opportunity for us. San Francisco's on the road, 10 a.m. Pacific time. Obviously, what is it? Is it 1 a.m.? Is it noon o'clock? Noon o'clock. Is it noon in Minnesota? Time zones are weird, but it'll be a different kind of game for the Niners. They'll definitely be on the road. Maybe some jet lag here or there, not in your own home for the first time in months. How will they handle kind of how the Falcons did in the game in 2020? Was it 22? Just 2022, where they scored early and it was like, San Francisco's flat-footed. the Jets or the Falcons are utilizing their speed. I could see the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell, who is a really good head coach. I think the Vikings are one of the most underrated head coaching units or coaching units in football as a whole. O'Connell's good. Flores is obviously great. The passing game is not going to be an issue for the Vikings. They have a ton of weapons to utilize, albeit they don't really have that, RB1. They kind of have this Aaron Jones, who is kind of a top 12, top 15 running back in football. He's good. He's a vet, knows how to play. But like that game against the Packers last year in the playoffs, we have seen over his career that the screen game can really be a weapon for Aaron Jones in an offense like the Vikings. And I really do believe that when you add in Ty Chandler, who's really fast on the ground, that the Vikings, I think, do possess the ability to keep San Francisco on their toes and even catch them off guard early in the game, get a quick score, and we all say, what was that? Inevitably, I do think San Francisco would then adjust, but I do think that with no Dre Greenlaw being out there, the expectation is that with D. Winters back at practice today, that he will likely start on Sunday, but there is no confirmation within that assumption. I would assume DFF will start. Got the pick last week. He's a safe option to start. So I think they'll work back D. Winters slowly but surely. But if he does play, that should help San Francisco against the screen game. But if DFF does play, I would fully expect the Vikings to utilize their screen game more often, at least early in the game. San Francisco should also get Yetur Gross-Matos back. Didn't play last week. We'll see him in the red and gold for the first time, hopefully this Sunday. Not the biggest, note to say, but when you get your third edge rusher back that can play the inside and play the outside, it's going to aid players like Bosa, players like Leonard Floyd. It'll certainly keep players like Robert Beal Jr. off the field, who was not very good against the Jets last week. So we should see an improvement of depth against or on the defensive line this week. And of course, if Malik Collins plays the way he did against the Jets, the Vikings aren't going to get to run the football at all. I mean, him and Hargrave were just monsters in the middle. The way they were able, again, to move the Jets' interior offensive line, there's a rep of Malik Collins going up against Elijah Vera Tucker, who was a first-round pick of New York's in 2021. Been injured off and on here or there, but relatively a solid offensive lineman. Malik Collins was by him in a second, essentially made him look like a tissue, how thin it was and how fast he got him out of the way. Malik Collins made a first-round pick a handful of years ago look like he was a paperweight. Malik Collins is a dog. I think that if that's the Malik Collins we're going to get week in, week out, and you're going to put that next to Javon Hargrave and Jordan Elliott, the league's in trouble. Malik Collins was nasty. There aren't many players that get that nasty label next to their name. Malik Collins, through 1 week, is certainly, to me, headed in that direction. He is nasty on that defensive line. And if you didn't watch much of him last week, please, on Sunday, keep your eyes on Malik Collins on the interior defensive line. I don't think it'll be a solid game for Aaron Jones or Ty Chandler on the ground. And also, further into that, Kevin O'Connell, for as good as he is in coordinating the pass game and getting in previous years Kirk Cousins open receivers and the scheme, like O'Connell's a good head coach and a good pass game coordinator, but really has struggled to scheme up the running game very well. So this game does feel like it'll be a lot of on Sam Darnold. It'll be a lot of, hey, Justin Jefferson, save me. Keep in mind, the Vikings aren't going to have TJ Hawkinson, so they're not going to have Addison. They're not going to have Hawkinson. There really is an opportunity for San Francisco to walk into this game and look, we want to come in and dominate. I really want to credit San Francisco against the Jets last week it was all business. You can tell that while again the first couple drives weren't great, that defense was ready to go from snap number one. The offense, I think, will pick things up in this game, but that defense has always been a tone setter for a Kyle Shanahan team that sometimes it takes Kyle to find a rhythm in a game and kind of feel out the opposing defense. I have all confidence in the world that this Niners defense is going to be able to stuff and stymie and limit and just keep in check a Sam Darnold led offense that, again, in 1 week of examples or sample size, was 29th in pass protection. If you can't block for your quarterback, you can't protect him. Nick Bosa is licking his chops, and I guarantee you. And this is one thing I have to talk about with this game is that while these two teams played each other last year, there was no Jay Jettas for the Vikings, that being Justin Jefferson. Obviously, a big improvement for them, but a lot's going to be made of Sam Darnold. A revenge game, was in San Francisco last year, was a backup. Now he's going to start and prove the world wrong. And that can certainly happen. San Francisco's played down to their fair share of opponents before, even dating back to 2019, the Falcons being one last year, the Browns, the Vikings, if you will, and even 2022, the Falcons. So it's not as if they haven't played down before on the road, 10 a.m. games. It's happened plenty of times. But I do think that Sam Darnold is more like a Geno Smith than he is a Brock Purdy. Sam Darnold being a first-round pick, I get it. The Jets were terrible around him. The Panthers were up and down. Had some good times there. Arguably his best stretch of his career was with Carolina. And I think that, had he not gotten hurt, it certainly would have been a better outcome for him in Carolina. Maybe David Tepper isn't, fighting fans in box suites if Sam Darnold's there, or even if they kept Christian McCaffrey. But besides the point, I like Sam Darnold. He's a nice guy. He's a good guy. He's a game manager that sometimes can give you a little more. Kind of sounds like Kirk Cousins, if I'm being honest with you. I think Sam Darnold has better arm talent than Kirk Cousins. But the issue is Kirk is a lot more consistent than Sam Darnold, whereas Sam Darnold can give you, these 45-yard, 60-yard shots downfield. And over his career, not considering last week, the next three throws may be errant, may be interceptions. I really think that, it does help the Niners defense more, having seen Darnold last year in practice on the scout team compared to helping Darnold seeing them. Being on scout team, despite what people believe, really doesn't help the quarterback that much. Yeah, there are some things you can take away from it, sure, but you are doing and emulating what the opposing quarterback your defense is facing that week is doing. Doesn't really do much for you. You were trying to be, the opposing team's quarterback. Hence why, Josh Johnson, or in previous years, Richie James was being Lamar Jackson in practice because of the speed he possessed. Sam Darnold, I'm sure, was not giving the Niners too many good looks. I'm sure, they're kind of walking into this game like, all right, Sam, we get it. You're a starter. Good for you. But, let's be honest here. Week one may have been a fluke, which Darnold was really good against the Giants. What's that worth? I have no idea. But he was 19 for 24, 208 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. And again, he was darn near perfect for about 3 quarters. If my memory serves correct, I don't think he threw his first incompletion until like late in the second, maybe early third quarter. That's how good he was. And again, with the 1 week sample, Sam Darnold looked good, looked like an alpha, if you will. Now, there are certainly layers to that conversation, but I I don't know how long the alpha Sam Darnold trend lasts. I don't think it lasts past this week, or at least maybe it skips a week in time because no TJ Hawkinson, no Jordan Addison. Not to say the Vikings offense is, only has one weapon, but you're almost giving the Niners an opportunity to double Justin Jefferson and make sure he's not the one to beat you. And I think, we have seen San Francisco play that very differently depending on who they're playing. Before the Rams got Puka Nacua, it was very much a let Cooper Kupp eat all day long. We're going to stop everybody else. We are going to make the Rams this. You have one lane to throw. All we're going to do is make sure we get tackles. And that works. San Francisco has been unafraid to let Cooper Kupp beat them because they know if it's quarterback and Cooper Kupp and we can stop the other 9 guys and get to the quarterback a handful of times, the Rams offense can't do much or can't hurt us as much as they would if, they have 4 or 5 guys involved in the passing game or the running game. Against the Vikings, though, Fred Warner is probably going to have his, that middle of the field is going to be closed. Sam Darnold, to me, doesn't feel like that guy that's going to throw outside the numbers, 15 times, 10 times a game. It feels like that Kevin O'Connell and Sam Darnold want to stay true to who he is. And that is, let's feed the middle of the field, which has been kind of a no-fly zone for quarterbacks against Fred Warner. But going further into that conversation, Diamador Lenore is out there talking trash already. He politely said that Darnold's a good quarterback and he respects him, but, he's going to win that battle. And of all the players on this team, Bosa, Warner, Purdy, McCaffrey, I said this in training camp that Lenore is creeping into that conversation of, when he talks, you want to believe what he's saying is true. You want to believe that if he makes a promise, he's going to make it and it's going to end up happening. So if he says he's going to get an interception this Sunday, I believe Lenore is going to pick off Sam Darnold this Sunday. And if he doesn't, the expectation is, no Jordan Addison. The receiver room is certainly weaker in Minnesota, albeit they have good weapons when they're fully healthy. It's just not the case. It's Jefferson, Aaron Jones, Ty Chandler, who even in Ty Chandler's case is very inconsistent, and then kind of nothing else to play with. So, San Francisco, the expectation is Mooney Ward's, shadowing Justin Jefferson with Yadam and Lenore kind of cleaning up the rest with maybe Talanoa Hufanga out there. It doesn't feel like that's going to be the case. Maybe it is. Maybe we do see the Tongan Tiger for the first time. I don't think we will, but maybe we do. Maybe we don't. And even if we don't, it'll be Odom and it'll be Jair Brown out there again, who were really good against the Jets in getting tackles. And, the one bad play of that game was, again, that kind of Leonard Floyd's offsides. The entire defense is like, what do we do? Are you going to call the flag? And by that time, Aaron Rodgers is flinging that ball 45 yards downfield to a wide open receiver. So that play is excusable because everyone was like, wait, we're frozen. What's going on? So, I don't want to say I don't believe in Sam Darnold or I don't want to buy into the hype because I like Sam Darnold. I used to call him the Red Rifle Jr. in honor of Andy Dalton or Sammy D. But, I really just, I have a hard time believing that just because Kyle Shanahan coached you for a year, that your entire outlook of your career has changed. As much as I've loved Kyle Shanahan, usually, not all the time, but usually he doesn't have the Chris Kocurek effect where Chris Kocurek gets a, run-of-the-mill edge rusher, former first-round pick, second-round pick, they're a bust, brings them in, revitalizes their career, they get paid big money, and they become usually a consistent contributor for the next team they're playing, where when you see a player leave Kyle Shanahan's offense, usually they get worse. maybe Sam Darnold is the outlier of that conversation, but I don't think it helps that Kyle Shanahan coached Sam Darnold. Kyle Shanahan is someone that has led defensive meetings before. He knows Sam Darnold's tells. He knows his weaknesses. And you don't think he's going to be in there helping Nick Sorensen? Of course he is. Like, Sam Darnold being in San Francisco last year certainly helped him as a player. Fine. It also helps San Francisco in this game of like, we know who you are, Sam. Me and my brother, we don't like the X-Men Origins Wolverine movie, but there's a quote in that movie we always make fun of because of the accent utilized by Hugh Jackman, where he's talking to Gambit, and he goes, "I know who you are, Gambit." Kyle Shanahan knows who you are, Sam Darnold. Like, that's a dumb reference, but it's like, he knows who you are, man. Like, you can't hide from him. And I think the inevitable, the likely outcome is that Sam Darnold maybe doesn't come crashing down to earth, but, doesn't have the same success he did against the Giants as he will against San Francisco, which, yeah, San Francisco's defense is so much better than the Giants, who seemingly don't know what they're doing in the front office if you watched Hard Knocks, and at times seem like they just are like flying by the seat of their pants. But if there is one player, again, like I kind of already stated earlier, that could stop or could be a hindrance to San Francisco winning, that easily is Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is the highest paid receiver in the NFL for a reason, a record-setting contract for a reason. He is phenomenal. Again, I do think that not having Addison and Hawkinson certainly decrease his odds of taking over a game, but it could also mean that, like Kyle Shanahan utilizes Deebo Samuel without CMC, of let's feed him more. If you're a Ryback fan, which I am certainly not, of WWE in 2010s, feed me more. I could see that happening in this game where, Kevin O'Connell says, look, we don't have these other weapons at our disposal. Let's just feed Jay Jettas and let's see what happens. Let's make them stop Jefferson. Sometimes we don't look at things from the other team's perspective. We look at things of how San Francisco can win this game. But sometimes you have to look at, what are the Vikings going to do? What's their game plan going to be? We already talked about defensively that Flores is going to blitz, going to give you cover 3, going to play 3 safety sets. He has all these tricks up his sleeve. He's like Harry Houdini out there sometimes, despite not getting credit for it and how good he is. Kevin O'Connell isn't like that. It's much more straightforward, but, this is week 2 of the NFL season. Their team is already banged up, whereas San Francisco minus Christian McCaffrey is basically 99% ready to go. They're all systems go. Nobody got hurt against the Jets. Jawan Jennings seems fine after the non-hip drop tackle that was not called, despite the rule change, mind you. But the Vikings are kind of banged up. And sometimes when you're banged up and you're like, what are we going to do? A lot of those teams just go back to Old Faithful, go back to the player they're paying the most for, the player you expect to take over games. Sometimes it's easy to say, well, you got to stop Tyreek Hill. Well, you got to stop Jamar Chase. Well, you got to stop Josh Allen. It's like, well, yeah, of course. How do you do that, though? In this case, it's a lot easier to stop a receiver than a quarterback, I will say. Jamar Chase is utilized, although similar, very differently than Justin Jefferson. A lot more screen passes to Jamar Chase than Jefferson. I would not be shocked that the Vikings try to get Jefferson out there on an island with Yadam a lot. Like that to me is the plan. Like, let's keep him away from Mooney Ward and Lenore, and let's let him just dial in and lock in on Yadam. Now, I don't think San Francisco would allow that to happen a lot, but anytime you see Jefferson on Yadam, You cannot tell me the play call is get it to Jay Jettas, get it to JJ, and it'll be Kevin O'Connell screaming at Darnold saying, look, if they ever have Yadam on Jefferson, which Yadam's a good cornerback, don't get me wrong, but he ain't Mooney Ward, he ain't Lenore. So, there is a mismatch in that department. So I could see them just like, look, we don't have much else to work with, so let's just feed the thing that works the best. But again, I really do think San Francisco has a clear advantage in the majority of this game. Trenches lean San Francisco heavily, especially on defense against their offensive line that was terrible against the Giants. The quarterback room, Purdy is head and shoulders above Sam Darnold. There are plenty of people that would point to the Vikings quarterback room entering this year as the worst quarterback room in football, with potential to be good, but the worst quarterback room in the entire NFL. A game against the Giants does not change that. Now, maybe we're wrong. Maybe I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid like I should, but I will continue to not drink Kool-Aid that really doesn't look appeasing to the eye until it actually tastes good. So I'm not buying Sammy D as a, breakout star or this next, hot thing because of one game against the Giants. But I do think San Francisco should have this game in the bag. But that's why you play the games. I just really think San Francisco, after leaving that game Monday night, feeling that good, putting the entire offseason behind them, they just look laser focused of like, we're going to do whatever it takes to win a Super Bowl, which should be the case. But I have a hard time believing the Vikings of all teams, who are fine, but again, hurt. And that secondary is not good on paper. I think we are going to see some fireworks in this game. This to me feels like maybe a 40 burger for San Francisco, or at least on paper, it feels like that. Maybe I'm wrong though. Maybe we see a much more, 20-17, a 24-20 kind of game. Especially if Brian Flores can get to Brock Purdy early. That is, I think, one of the biggest X factors in this game, Purdy against Brian Flores. But my score prediction of this game is San Francisco 33, the Vikings 16. 33 for the Niners and 16 for the Minnesota Vikings. I think it might be close early, but I think San Francisco just pulls away as this game progresses, kind of like how it was against the Jets in week one. It was like, it's kind of close in the beginning, but ultimately it's like, okay, San Francisco is just so much better than Minnesota in almost every single facet. There's only one player on the Vikings that would likely start in San Francisco. Like, that sounds crazy, but it's true. Like, it really is true. Like, it's Jay Jettas, and that's kind of it. But again, football's football. That's why you play the game. And that's the reason why you come here, because you like talking about your San Francisco 49ers. And if you could kindly follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X or the Twitter, whatever your name you prefer. If you would also follow us on Instagram, 49ers.access. And if you want to see your Niners play, by any chance, you're flying to Minneapolis, you're flying to Minnesota, and you want to buy late tickets to watch the Niners play the Vikings, go to SeatGeek.com. Find your ticket. Make sure it's a good one. If it's good, it's green. If it's red, it's bad. But get some green tickets on the website, SeatGeek.com. And when you go to checkout, use promo code 49ERSACCESS. 49 ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com to save yourself $20 off your first purchase. And if you're not going to the game and you just want to have the latest Niners news, podcast, YouTube videos, and articles at your disposal, all in the same place, because you don't want to have to Google 55 different websites, go to sportsspyder.com and you can find everything you need to and want to know about the San Francisco 49ers all in one place. Again, podcast, articles, news, YouTube videos, all in one place just for you, organized by your favorite teams. And look, the football season is in full swing now. Week number 2 has already commenced. If you haven't joined my Locker Fantasy Football League down below, there's a link down below. Download the Locker Fantasy Football app in the App Store. Join the Fantasy Football League titled 49ers Access. It's a $15 entry fee, but the top 3 scores win, and the grand prize is an escalating jackpot of $450. If we can get 30 plus people, friends, family, relatives, does not matter, the acquaintance you met on the BART train to work this morning, get them to join the Fantasy Football League at Locker. The link is down below. If we can get 30 plus people, that jackpot starts to climb and climb and climb. And before you know it, we're talking $500, $600. And if we get enough people, maybe, just maybe, might inch ourselves towards one of those 1K prizes. But that's determined on what and how many people you can bring to that Locker Live Fantasy Football League. Again, the league name is 49ers Access. Click that link down below and download the Locker Live Fantasy Football app. Let's enjoy some football this season and maybe earn some money on the side. You can play with me, you can play against me, but let's have some fun in the next 17 weeks of the NFL season, because before you know it, it's going to be over. And the last thing you want to do is not win some money when it's just one click away. So join that link down below. Get the app and join the Locker Live Fantasy Football app league, again titled 49ers Access. And if you also kindly could, leave a like on the video, like, share, subscribe, hit that bell notification. If you're listening on the audio podcasting platforms, give us a 5-star review. Tell your friends, tell your family. Word of mouth is the biggest way podcasts grow. And also those 5-star reviews get us to climb up those charts. We want to be at the top. The only way to help is to kindly ask you to give us a 5-star review. I don't care what you put in the comments, but down below in the YouTube comments, if you could, tell us your score prediction for this game. Niners, Vikings. I have 33 going to San Francisco, 16 going to Minnesota. How do you see this game ending up? As always, enjoy Sunday's game. 10 a.m. start on CBS Sports, not Fox, CBS Sports. Don't want to forget that. 10 a.m., Niners, Vikings. Cannot wait to watch. Hope you enjoy week 2 of the NFL season. And as always, my name is Sterling Bennett, and stay faithful.